This is Brent of the Brook-Bush Institute, and in this video we're going to go over manipulations or high velocity thrust techniques. I assume that if you're watching this video, you're watching it for educational purposes and that you are a licensed professional with high velocity thrust or manipulation techniques in your scope of practice. If you're not sure, check with your state board. Most physical therapists, chiropractors, and osteopaths, you're in the clear. I believe that ATCs, you can't do manipulations in the United States, although other countries. Again, check your scope. Of course, massage therapists and personal trainers, these are generally not within your scope. Of course, you could continue to watch these videos just for educational purposes, learn a little anatomy, learn a little biomechanics. If you're going to do these techniques, please make sure that you have a good rationale for putting your hands on a patient. This should be based on assessment, and if you're going to assess, I'm hoping that you'll assess, use these interventions, and reassess to ensure that you're getting the result that you're looking for and have good reason to continue using this technique. In this video, we're going to do the shotgun manipulation. That is the pubic symphysis malalignment / stiffness muscle energy technique. I know some of you have seen. I'm going to have my friend Yvette come out. She's going to help me demonstrate. Now, this particular technique is a little hard to explain, and its use is not perfectly explainable by biomechanics or human movement science. What I do know is that this particular technique tends to solve this little problem of when somebody has dysfunction of the pubis, this works. All right, so when might that happen? I'll give you a couple case scenarios. You have somebody with an asymmetrical weight shift on the overhead squat. You do your sacroiliac joint dysfunction tests. You notice two things. You have stiffness on the side opposite of the shift, and then a lot of times you end up with, when you measure out ASIS and PSIS height, you kind of see maybe something you think is an inanimate torsion. Well, most people would go in and treat the SI joint, and that's fine, but what about the other side of your pelvis? It's not ridiculous to think that your pubis, right, would be stressed in that position and could cause it to become stiff or maybe even a little out of alignment, right? So that's one potential reason. The other thing I've seen where this technique comes in real handy is, I'm sure some of you guys have seen this like really stubborn adductor overactivity. Like you can do your soft tissue techniques, you can do your release techniques, but it seems like as soon as they get up and move, like everything like kind of binds down a little bit. Try this technique. I mean, obviously I want you to do all of the other stuff related to compensation patterns and do your overhead squat assessment and goniometry. But occasionally I'll find that the adductor overactivity is related to this pubic symphysis dysfunction. And once that's corrected with this technique, all of a sudden adductor activity calms down, then you can do your soft tissue and lengthening techniques and everything finally starts to normalize. So what does this particular technique look like? Well, it's interesting. Although we call it a manipulation, a lot of times we don't even have to do a high velocity thrust. All right, so first thing I would probably start with is go ahead and lay your legs down. I would probably start with palpation of the pubic symphysis and see if I could feel anything that maybe felt like, you know, one side was like this and one side was like this. Here's how to palpate somebody's pubis without getting yourself in a terrible amount of trouble, right? Number one, ask. Be like, hey, I think because of this pelvis thing that we're working on, like we might have some stiffness here. You mind if I palpate to see if I can feel anything going on? It's okay? Okay. So here's what you do. Find their belly button and then drop the palm of your hand, slide it down on top of their pubis, right? So if you do this, you're a lot less likely to miss with a nice broad surface, and it's definitely a lot less likely to get you in trouble going from top down than from bottom up. Right? So once I find it, I can then slide my thumbs right over the top of her pubis. And if that looks slightly like, I'm not going to say that this is 100% reliable, but it looks a little bit like this side might be a little higher. All right, so we're going to see if we can correct that using this technique. Now what she's going to do is she's going to come into hook lying position. I've seen so many variations of this technique, I can't even tell you, but it always comes down to resisted abduction followed by resisted adduction. And on the resisted adduction, we may potentially hear a cavitation, or the patient or client might feel an adjustment in their pubis, and that's supposed to be what realigns everything. So here's how I do it. I usually start with the legs all the way together, right? And I just kind of give them a hug. And what I say is, okay, like imagine you're doing, Yvette happens to follow our corrective exercise stuff, so you know what a clam looks like. Imagine doing a clam with both sides at the same time, right? So she's gonna push her knees out. Go ahead, push, 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 push. Come on, you got more than that. That's ridiculous. Come on, come on. There you go. Good, now hold this for 5 to 10 seconds, and then have her relax. Good, and then I'm gonna go out a little further, right? And usually I'll have her push against my belly, right? Go ahead, I want you to flatten my stomach for me, I need that. Good, and push out against my hands, right? So now I have nice way of resisting without hurting myself. Good, 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 good. And then the last one I'll do, good, relax, is we'll go out as far as we can with arms long. Good, and there's a reason I'm doing it like this, right? So go out, push, 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 as hard as you can. Now that I have her pushing out into abduction, isometric abduction this wide, I can easily then slide my arm in between her knees like this. Go squeeze as hard as you can. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Good, good. Hold for 5 seconds and then relax, right? So I've seen this done other ways where it's kind of like a hug and then only a fist, right? I find that that doesn't tend to work as well. I do find that a little wider adduction does help. I find that by doing the 3 different distances, what I'm actually doing is coaxing her into a width that allows me to slide my forearm right down between her knees so that she can then adduct against them without losing the momentum we build up with this abduction. Now, why abduction before adduction? Everybody talks about reciprocal inhibition, but that doesn't make any sense, right? Because if we reciprocally inhibited our adductors, what would be pulling the pubis apart? I have no idea. But I can tell you that if you just try to do this, generally speaking, it doesn't work. So the last thing I'll show you guys is, let's say I did those 3 things. All right, so we'll mimic it, right? 5 seconds, good. 5 seconds, good. 5 seconds as hard as you can, boom, down, squeeze. And I got the sense that she tried as hard as she can, but we didn't get it. I might do one last thing if I think she's up for it. I don't think I have any contraindications. I might do, okay, go ahead and abduct as hard as you can. Good. Push, 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 push. Good. Notice the position I'm in, right? My forearms are square with the direction of force, so I'm still not using that much energy. And then I would go cross hands, get my palms down there so that I'm not getting pokey on the inside of her knee. Good. Squeeze against me. And then as she's squeezing, give her a little quick high velocity thrust. So that would be the closest thing we get to like a traditional manipulation. All right, so there you guys go. Abduction, probably 3 times, 5 to 10 seconds. You guys know I like to do a cascade of various lengths. You're then gonna have them squeeze. You can squeeze fists. I like to do full forearm. Make sure when you sink this forearm down, it's full palm on one knee and fleshy part of your tricep on the other. Because if you get bony part of your tricep into their knee, or bony part of your elbow into their knee, they're not going to be happy. If you wanted to give a high velocity thrust after that a try, do at least one more abduction, and then cross hands, right? And then one little, move, let's say 2 to 4 inches with a nice bit of vigorous force against their adduction. The great thing about this technique is, let's say it worked. Let's say we think that for the next week, this needs to be reinforced. We can do this at home. And it's actually pretty easy. So if I have Yvette go ahead and put this around her knees, like she's gonna do her glute work, her glute activation work, but I'm gonna have her put it up a little higher on her thighs. All right? And then I'm gonna have her take like a foam roll, and she can hold the foam roll kind of like between her feet, and then she can make sure that this band is high enough on her thighs that the foam roll stays in place, kind of held by her feet and the band. All right? And you can hold on to it with your hands if you need to. All right, so you're gonna abduct against this band 3 times. Good, hold it for at least, that was like 2 seconds. Can you hold it for 5 seconds? Right? Make sure it's a heavy band too, guys. Like a good heavy band. This isn't like an activation exercise where we need full range of motion. We need more isometric type of force. Good, don't lose that. Good, and then once she's done 3 times for 10 seconds, all she has to do is now squeeze against the foam roll as hard as you can. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Boom. And this can be part of her home exercise program, right? If you're with the Brooke Bush Institute stuff, you know that you'd be release, mobilize, lengthen, then activate. This would be a mobilization technique I would put between her release techniques and whatever stretching I thought she needed to do. How's that? You think you can do that at home? Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, guys, go ahead and try this at home. It's not one of those techniques that's going to work on everybody you ever try it. It's not like a cervical manip where once you get good at cervical manips or thoracic manips, you can kind of get a cavitation on anybody. This is one of those techniques that's very specific, but it'll make you look, I've said this in some other videos with like these little tiny techniques that if it is the right technique, it'll make you look like a hero. You'll look like a total magician, right? If somebody has that weird adductor, tingly, like the tightness that won't go away, it's kind of like hip impingement but not quite, and you get a cavitation and it all goes away, good for you, right? If it doesn't work, if this doesn't change any of your movement assessments, don't do it, right? Just like any other technique in our programs, assess, address, reassess. This particular technique is one of those that's going to be effective maybe 20% of the time, but when it is effective, it tends to be really effective. So keep it in your back pocket. You guys have any questions, leave them in the comments box below. A couple of points to recap. Knowing your anatomy and knowing your biomechanics will certainly help you choose the right technique for the right patient. If you're unsure whether manipulations are appropriate due to their higher intensity, it's okay to do mobilizations. Most research points to manipulations being slightly more effective, but mobilizations being very effective. And of course, we have those videos for you if you want to start with those less intense techniques. Make sure that if you are doing any technique that is based on assessment, and of course that you're reassessing, ensuring that the technique is effective for the patient that you're working on. And when it comes to all manual techniques, guys, manipulations, maybe more than any other, look for opportunities to get live education. Although I know videos are convenient and I'm happy to have these up for you guys to watch, it would be so much more helpful to use those videos as a recap of one-on-one attention with somebody who's experienced with manipulation techniques. At the very least, grab a colleague, grab a friend, and start practicing these before you bring them into clinic and start using them on patients and clients. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments box below.